All set? Yeah. Our next speaker has a bachelor's degree in electroengineering and psychology from the University of Detroit. He did graduate work in psychophysiology, polygraphy, and biofeedback, as well as studied metallurgy, crystallography, and production steel in Detroit. He's a systems analyst with IBM in Detroit and Chicago, also a graphics development project through MIT's Space Lab. Lived with spiritual communities in Virginia, Massachusetts, and Finhorn. Currently, he's a vice president and technical director of SS Electric in Buffalo, founder of Crystal Hill Farm, and also the Network of Light, which is a beautiful spiritual newsletter for the community in Buffalo. Speaking on the topic of shape significance of genetic material as a wave path for frequency signature, my good friend Dan Winter.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom, so much. I really appreciated Bob Gulick's comments about the nature of what's evolving on planet Earth and our role in it. And I'd like to think of what I'd try to share with you as very much continuity from that. Basically, I became interested in using geometry to model what was happening in electron shells when I had this simple idea that if you understood all of physics and the universe as a simple shape of pressure, that when we began naming things, we made the conceptual mistake of thinking we were naming substance, when the only thing we really had to name in a universe made of only one substance was shape. So thus, if we understand the function of shape as a kind of wave guide, then we have a key to understanding how focus, the role of mind in a universe, is the only power required to create in a universe made of one substance, pressure. Simplifying that, we have the idea that if there's only one substance, physicists are telling us one other thing, and that is all complex shapes in the universe are made of one wave shape, the sine wave. So we don't need to have something complex in order to really understand the role of mind in a universe made of waves. We have one substance, it's compressible, and we have one wave shape, the sine wave. Any complex shape, a cell, a snowflake, can be described, fully understood, as a frequency signature, a spectral fingerprint, a Fourier transform, a description in the frequency domain of what exists in the scalar length domain. At any rate, this is a kind of backdrop then which can help us assume our responsibility as creators in a universe, since we do seem to have some of that power, the ability to focus momentum, to align fields. It's really very simple to understand the power of mind in a universe made of wave. If you think of what the finger does on a guitar string, it chooses the place which stands still. By choosing the place which stood still on the guitar string, it chose the frequency, the wave envelope, the shape. So focus, intention, mindfulness has this power to choose what is held fixed and thus create. Can we start the slides, please? I'd like to use that as the kind of backdrop to do some very quick images of how to understand this simple compressional world as a way to visualize the birth of shape in the universe. If you have a universe made only of smoke, what can you build with it? In fact, if you have one medium, the only thing that you can build of that same medium is a torus, a donut, a tourbillon, a smoke ring. That toroidal shape, which is represented in our image of the brain and images of the universe, is primal because different axes of rotation are superposed. You have axes of rotation this way and axes this way. So the reason it's stable is because two gyroscopes are living together and loving each other. And because of that, one gyroscope you can't push one way. You know how it seems to be stable? Because it's storing inertia. And the other gyroscope you can't push the other way. It's called a multiply connected topology, and it's a simplistic description of why the toroid is primally stable. So it's the birth of primal shape. In a contiguous field made of this compressible medium, if you superpose the origin of limit, the power of limits is the power to give birth to shape. It's the feminine, the womb. And the power of limits adds shape, the birth of the toroid, to the sphere. So if something limits the primal shape of the universe, like the distance light can travel until gravity pulls it back, then it has to assume the primal shape, toroidal. Eddington's formula for the volume of the universe and Arthur Young reflexive universe all have this saddle-shaped model of our visible universe superposed on a larger toroid. And the Big Bang theory is really our sense of perspective with relation to the center of the vortex. In theosophy, occult chemistry, Leadbeater and Besant visualized the primal subatomic particle as essentially toroidal, heart-shaped, the anu. Later, this was justified in terms of more contemporary quantum physics, psi perception of quarks by Phillips from England, in which the three anu were associated with the quarks. You see this helical array in the center of a toroid as the shape of the primal subatomic particle, formed from the formative processes necessary to balance the geometry of pressure to make the primal shape possible. The idea then of polarities, or differences of charge, and differences between electrical, magnetic, strong nuclear and weak nuclear, the fundamental forces, then become a difference of the harmonic or frequency of pressure in which the flow form occurs. And the net difference of flow centripetally, that is inward, yang, versus centrifugally, outward, yin, is what we call charge. Here we superpose the video, which I was going to show you. Doesn't show up very clearly on the projector, so we'll do it from the slides. But I have a video on a subject called Crystal Life, the Way of the Waves, which is this is an excerpt. And this is a simple Lee-Saljoule waveform of the notes C and G, a fifth, 1.5 times the base frequency. And you see how primal shapes give us the origin of the possibility of complex shapes. Here I've taken a feedback loop, a Moiré pattern, between the video camera and screen, rotated the angle of the camera with respect to the screen, adjusted the phase delay of the camera feeding back to the screen, and generated a variety of interesting feedback patterns. These on the video are a bit more dramatic, but maybe I'll have time for that on Monday, or rather on Sunday. Here, we now have this idea that the primal standing toroid gives us a model for the birth of the fundamental particle, a vortex theory of matter, if you will, as old as Descartes and as new as Bill Hamilton. The vortices superposed on the regular polyhedra, you see how each face of the polyhedra becomes a vortex, and every axis of symmetry around which the polyhedra could spin becomes one axis around which the vortex can spin. As it were, each axis of symmetry is the superposition of one toroid. And remember, every time you add one axis of rotation, you're adding dimension. What that means is you're adding a harmonic to the spectral envelope of the nodes which comprise the net array. This was the vision of how the columns of the atomic table were derived according to Leadbeater and Besant in occult chemistry. This is from one of the later, more physical analyses of occult chemistry, showing how the primal shapes of the regular polygons can be subsumed as understood by nesting of vortices, toroid. Similar. This was then their model of the atomic table from Crookes. In the top there, not very clear, does the focus adjust, cube, tetrahedron. The dumbbell group is icosahedral dodecahedron, then going back to tetrahedron cube. So that what we call valence in the outer electron, which describes our columnation of the atomic table, is in fact the number of axes of symmetry of the shape of the outer vortex net array. Again, described the same, except instead of graphically, just laid out in TypeScript. Then, seen three-dimensionally, that same atomic table becomes a lemniscate, a kind of figure 8, that each axis of the atomic table, what the atoms below have in common is this geometry of the outer electron array. And again, this is the same picture before lemniscates the atomic table. Most of the above from occult chemistry, Leadbeater and Besant, in the theosophic literature. This is from the Universal One, Walter Russell, showing the derivation of the atomic table from the simple heterodynes, or beat note interference pattern of one wave to all the lengths we call differences in the distances of the electron shells, which define what we call differences in substance, the atomic table. So each atom of the atomic table is derived from the unfolding of a simple heterodyne. Universal One is a wonderful book. So then this nesting of heterodynes becomes a model for the subsuming of one nest of harmonics inside the other. and we have the Kabbalistic type array. I'm going quickly. It's interesting that 3 speakers in a row chose the same slide. And again, I think this is from sensitive chaos, similar to kinematics. And again, you see how the toroidal array went superposed and folded back. And here you were talking about the sound making a pentagram, in this case hexagram, out of the liquid. Sorry, the slide's in sideways. This is the superposition of coherent sound upon a column of smoke. I think this was sensitive chaos. I'm going quickly because I'd like to, this is a interference refraction crystal platonic solid. There's some very interesting symmetries between the icosahedron on one side and dodecahedron on the other side, which I'll explain with a 3-dimensional model. Slides in backwards, but it's okay. It shows the precession of golden mean ratio in nested triangles. Edge length, radii, arc length, all proceeding in golden mean ratio, and areas within the triangles proceeding in golden mean squared ratio. Same thing except spiraling rectangles. Same thing, spiraling rectangles, the vesica. Same thing except spiraling cubes. In this case, I've taken 10 spirals of the golden mean generated at the MIT lab on their plotter and phase arrayed them at 36 degrees, and I generate the perfect nested pentagrams, which are what we see when we look at dodecahedron nested inside icosahedron infinitely, as Bob Gulick described. Here I'm using this, which later in my book, which I have extra copies here for folks, One Crystal's Dance, the Star Mother, I have laid out on the DNA helix seen from above, which that picture we've also seen twice today of the decagonal shape of the vertical view of DNA. And here, the way I interpret that is the blossoming gene, the cup of the grail, the name for the chalice which holds the light. Light is fooled. It doesn't know whether it's entering a simple net on a planar surface or an infinite tube. It all looks the same from up there. First, it finds its way into the nest, there to discover the perfect place to raise the heterodyne children of light without interference. A perfect nested pentagram. This is the trap which tempts light out of the fast lane into biology. Tempts light out of the fast lane into biology. This is the same map, 0.6181, 1.618, 2.618. So golden mean to the 0 power, to the first power, to the second power, to the third power, etc. 3-dimensionally, you're beginning to get the idea that we can conserve the information of shape in length, in area, and here in volume. The same nest of rectangles of the golden mean. The slide didn't turn out down here, but this is the same picture we saw of rectangles of golden mean, except extrapolated 3-dimensionally to show the cubic extrapolation of ratio. This was the illustration of the nest of 5 tetrahedron making the star dumbbell group of the atomic table. This is from Mathematics of the Cosmic Mind by Plummer, very similar to a slide Bob Gulick showed of the nesting of the regular polygons. We'll use the model in vivo, as it were. This I would like to talk a lot about today, and as time permits, it is the ratcheting of 5 cubes tilted on the Mac 3D graphics at 32 degrees from flat, and then ratcheted 5 times around 72 degrees and stopped on the way. And what it makes is a dodecahedron. So the 1 cube we'll see in the dodecahedral model on the table here can occur in that same dodecahedron 5 times. And as I say here, the angle at which the cube is tilted is a critical angle of phase shift. It tilts a planet, we'll discuss this, from an octet truss array, the octahedral, tetrahedral, net, cube lattice array, to the next sequence of arrays, which is icosahedral, dodecahedral. And the significance of that as a new grid for the planet is discussed, of course, in Argoius, but also in Anti-Gravity in the World Grid, in which Barbara Hero's work occurs, among others. Again, the same cluster of 5 cubes. I'm so happy with the graphics package. If anybody has a Mac Plus, get Mac 3D. I'll even give you some of the routines. You plug in your first dodec. I plugged in the X, Y, and Z coordinates. By the way, X, Y, and Z coordinates for all of the vertices in here are simple powers of the golden mean, okay, of everything you see here. But at any rate, I plug in the X, Y, Z coordinates of all the vertex points in one dodecahedron, and then extrapolate as a toolbox from the menu and nest my dodecahedron. And then I rotate. This is the same nest, and I have nested dodecahedron seen from above, the infinite nest of pentagrams on which we could phase lock the 10 spirals of golden mean. And then seen from another angle, you see the hex, which is exactly what the cube seen from above is, which is what you see when you see the top of quartz, which is why the cube fits so nicely into the dodecahedron. And here you see the image of the nested vortices. So that's the same array, it's just a changed angle of vision. Angle is everything. This is the model here, which we'll discuss. Ditto, 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 ditto. Same model. That was dodecahedron icosahedron. Again, 3 speakers in a row. It shows the same slide. Okay. DNA. So we understand the significance of holding information in a certain net ratio because the adjacent lengths are golden mean. Okay. Now, the significance of the golden mean as a Fibonacci progression is this: that each number, a plus b plus c, in the progression added together equals the following one. That's called arithmetic progression. In addition, each number, a times the golden mean equals b, b times the golden mean equals c. Any number in the progression times this constant, the golden mean, equals the next one. That's called geometric progression. The thing about physics that builds everything out of waves is it has to use heterodyning, which means you take 2 waves, you find them a place to hang their hats together, call it love. And then they make children, the heterodyne children of light. And they must do it without interference or their momentum is lost. And when momentum is lost, memory and mind is lost. So DNA fulfills this necessary requirement to conserve mind, memory, to conserve order along a pathway between frequencies, because every adjacency fills this requirement of the sum and difference and harmonic multiple heterodynes fit the nest. So the rotating dodecahedron forms decagon. By the way, this was originally, some of this was originally extrapolated from geometric extensions of consciousness by Anne Griswold King, who was a friend of Al Holm in Philadelphia. Wonderful lady, architect as well. Rotating dodecahedron forms decagon with 10 turns circumference in each turn, a divine proportion progression. Vertical increment of turn, phi. Horizontal increment of turn, phi squared. Radius of turn, phi cubed. Length, area, volume. What does the universe have to conserve along a pathway? Only shape. Shape is the only thing the universe has to convey. This is the elegant pathway for accomplishing it. I've laid from fields of form by, I have to think of the author, but at any rate, it's in the anthroposophic literature, the superposition of the axial array of the muscle tissue of the heart next to the anu, showing this primal way the universe has of using the liquid crystal of muscle tissue as a similar waveguide for a primal kind of stability. If you can hold your own, if you have a path with a heart, then you know who you are, you have identity, and that's our name for the immune system. I wanted to say something more about Sentix, which has been brought up many times. This is the key picture from Sentix by Manfred Klein. He used something analogous to spectral analysis, which was the computerization of average transients, which averages out the shape of the muscle pressure upon the table, which we experimented with the other day here. So if you wish to express emotion, joy, pride, awe, anger, pity, fear, you express it by the shape of how you touch. So if you were expressing love versus anger versus impatience, okay, what he showed was that cross-culturally this was identifiable, it was characteristic, it was archetypal. And that means, and he also showed that you couldn't do 2 at once. In a sense, emotionally it's impossible to rub your head and pat your belly, according to Manfred Klein. Pardon?
What's the list again?
Well, I use joy, pride, awe, anger, pity, fear as a description of the hierarchy of emotions from the Gurdjieff spiritual school, sacred gymnastics, designed to evoke the emotions in that order. That's not the order he used. He's using love, sex, anger, grief, hate, reverence, joy.
Yeah, it seemed like you had more.
Pardon?
You had a list of 5.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the focus is not good here. The book is wonderful, Sentix. It's a little hard to find. The point I'm trying to make is that the function of emotion in the bloodstream of planet Earth is to massage the frequency envelope and joy of the gravitational field that is her collective mind. So what are people for in the emotional sense is to build the stuff of collective mind with coherent emotion. This was Gurdjieff's key point and the function of sacred gymnastics and ecstasy. That was the centric transducer. Notes about Kundalini, which we'll wait for another day. It's in the book. And then the natural tendency of man to assume the shape where ecstasy is transferred. Jacob's ladder. If the person on the step below you gets help from you, then you have your ticket to the next one. Pentagonal dodecahedral array is the path to the stars. This is from Keys of Enoch, J.J. Hurtak. I think that's it. That's good enough. Can we kill the slides? Bring up the lights. I want to play with this toy here. And I'm going to leave the light there. It's okay. This is real enough here. The thing that if you don't come away with anything else here, the outer gold figure, gold is the golden mean as it were, the length that is gold here is the same as the length that's yellow in the pure system. So note that the waves, the same wavelength that made the outer dodecahedron, made the next one in the blue icosahedron as a perfect nest. No change was required. Translation of vorticity. It was, can't hear the tape. Oh, for the tape. Sorry, Tommy. Yes, translation of vorticity. Let me just mention to you that in Unified Science to Understand Miracles by some fellow from a spaceship, the formula for the translation of vorticity in a torus was used to derive the fine structure constant, 1/137 ... The idea is that if you know how rotation, it's translated from line to circle to line, you have the key from energy to matter. Illustrations, an example, in the pyramid, the radius dividing evenly into height, you have this wave that comprises circumference, circle, being exactly able to phase lock onto the line that comprises energy, straight down line from above, male versus female. Energy, line, circle, female, matter. And so this translation of vorticity that occurs in the pyramid brings energy to matter. And the pyramid's original function, to phase lock the Earth after a tilted grid, is illustrative of that requirement. Example B, Victor Schauberger, choice of the shape of the horn of the antler to pour the water through to translate the vorticity from perfect circle to perfect line in a pathway which loses nothing. So the translation of vorticity, which occurs in the infinite nest of dodecahedron, is illustrative of the universe's desire to bring rotation to line into perfect balance, which is what the spiral of the golden mean is and comprises this nest. So the golden mean edge length three-dimensionally, any axis of symmetry you look at here is the perfect nest of pentagrams you saw two-dimensionally. And all of the laws of the golden mean apply. Every vertex position in the entire model, octahedron green in the center, two tetrahedron, cube red, dodecahedron green, icosahedron blue, and dodecahedron gold, every vertex in their x, y, and z coordinate is a simple power of the golden mean. So what that tells you is the distance from the axes of symmetry proceeds in that simple net ratio. It means that the universe doesn't have to do any work to get momentum along the pathway of elegance. So some ways in which we're using this information specifically to try to accomplish something useful in the health field is we have a research proposal that's been accepted at Millard Fillmore Hospital where we're using the biofeedback devices. We're actually talking to wonderful Valerie Hunt, Dr. Hunt, I'm so glad you're here, that we choose transducers, heart and brain, spectral analyze multiple channels, calculate the frequency of greatest coherence, and feed back the frequencies of heart and brain as a musical chord to teach coherence. And the volume of that chord varies with the coherence between. The TM literature is replete with examples of coherence increase correlated to city states and other beneficial effects of intentional relaxation. I have the literature with me. So in perspective, the teaching of coherence is the teaching of metabolism to hang together. So the name of coherence is what gives order to the water in the cell and makes it dance. And it's the same thing which makes the glands dance, as Ben Bentoff so well documented in his Stalking the Wild Pendulum, where he measured the acoustic phase entrainment between the glands. So what we're doing with this then is we teach coherence not just heart to brain, but you teach it to planet as well. The third variable, we're using Tom Vallone's wonderful ELF detector into the spectrum analyzer and The third note in the musical chord heard by the person learning to relax is the planet's resonance itself. And the musical frequency of that is a way of learning to cohere and couple, phase, and train the planet, which is collective mind. So this is an example of a way we use the lessons of coherence. The immune system is comprised of the envelope of the cells knowing who they are. If you know your name, then you have a role to play in the universe. What's happening on the other side of the cell to the 1,000 mitochondria there, it's obviously happening too quick for a strictly stoichiochemical transfer. It's obviously a resonance entrainment. The microtubules within the cell are waveguides. So the cell's ability to have this dance called metabolism is strictly related to the coherence, the orderliness of the liquids of which it's made. So if we teach coherence at the glandular level, we have the genetic material as the perfect stuff of which to make the connection to the cellular level. The long waves of the emotions are coupled to the short waves of the cell via explicitly the genetic material. All kinds of implications for cancer, no time for that. Let's talk about planet. So we have this metaphor of the function of the dodecahedral array in accomplishing a connectedness between the short and the long in the worlds of the cell's relationship to the body. What are we to learn about what's happening to the planet now? I'm speaking of the harmonic convergence. The story told in Anti-Gravity and the World Grid is of the Tibetans gathering in a circle to raise a huge rock up the cliff. And they had a way of doing it. It was very interesting. They would cut the rock as round as they could. They'd sit it in a stone-shaped chalice bowl, and then they would gather around and measure off with great vigor the exact arc lengths to set up their cacophonous musical instruments in a perfect arc around the stone. And then after the lengths were carefully measured off, and those measurements are in here from the English Royal Society of Science, they would commence their din. And the music of those instruments would sometimes crack and break the stone, but those that didn't break, think of Earth, went up the cliff, lifted and rose, and there were many eyewitnesses, musically. What is the metaphor of the planet's relationships, the other planet's relationship to planet Earth in choreographing a lifting force? Obviously, we must assume some symmetrical array in order that mind can hang together enough to be lifted together. Actually, the story goes rather far back to the friends from Sirius planting seeds which were the tectonic stones of the main grid faces of the planet as it was born in Pangaea when the planets were together. And the migration of the tectonic grid stones around the planet were the glands of the planet attempting to find the ecstatic positions for a role in this dance of ecstasy. And the arrival at the presage to the dodecahedral array is the octet truss structure we find the grid in presently. Examples Joe Jackman and others in Anti-Gravity and the World Grid. The thing about what happens to the cube is that it is tilted at exactly 32 degrees before you can spin it and make a dodecahedron. The present axial tilt of planet Earth is 23 degrees. The planet has need for a vessel to convey mindfulness across galaxies. It's another name for the wheels of Ezekiel. It's decagonal, teardrop, Christos. And we as a species have, well actually we as a planet have used that vessel before. The Mayans left. They left geometric clues to how to leave. Now, obviously, the goal of planet Earth is not necessarily to leave, but you will recall that the measurement of success of a schoolroom is that the students can leave. But the thing about planet Earth is that mindfulness of the sort that propagates across galaxies leaves only as a collective mind, because there's not enough coherence individually to accomplish this. So assuming the net array that produces this vesicle, this grail, this chalice that catches enough light to fold the crystal of our collective mind, translated across galaxies, requires the birth of the dodecahedral array superposed on the planet Earth, the new grid. It is like when we call the ancients of days the L, as in Elohim, we were speaking of a phase shift. The 90-degree representation of the L is the translation of vorticity from the habit of attending to the node, where we seem to be living, to the habit of attending to the wave. That translation of attention, that translation of vorticity, is precisely accomplishable in terms of the net toroidal arrays and the heterodyne progressions we've talked about in the dodecahedron. So the planet Earth is hungering to be born as a living body, and the stuff of her blood is coherent emotion. So cities where apartments exist as bleeding emotional sores on the surface of the planet about to be rubbed off. And places where people are living close to the earth and ringing true exist as places where fountains of this new blood to make a mind for a planet are gushing forth, and the planet is saying, yeah, do it. What do you need? I'll help you. Okay? Because the massaging of the envelope of frequencies that occurs in the glands of the body is building that stuff of coherence that builds collective mind. It is the blood. Gravity is blood. So free energy devices aren't free at all. They tap the blood of the planet, which the planet is happy to give, as long as, just like an egg white wants to see its yolk born. At any rate, so we can feed the collective mind of the planet by taking on this question in physics called change of heart. Physics is really phi 6, physical phi cycle, phi the golden mean, you see. And a name for 5 is similarly derived. And angel, archangel. We have many mystical roots in our language. So what would constitute a change of heart for us to begin to assume that we have some intuition now what are people for and would like to be part of this? There's this harmonic convergence. We have this little song and dance playing for Niagara Falls, and I have copies of what our group is doing, and it's here, and I invite you to take some. And our little publication network of light, our little logo is this nest of dodecahedrons. There are some of us who, in spite of the sort of grimness of planet Earth, it's like the crest of the wave. You know, the wave is approaching shore, and the shoreline starts encroaching, okay? The mineral resources are depleted, so the wave is pushed up, okay, just at that moment before the crash, when it would fall over on top of itself, and its momentum would be washed. There is that special moment where in the whitecap, the molecules that have best stood on the shoulders of their brothers can catch the light and become the clouds. And the harmonic convergence symbolizes the crest of the wave before the crash. Now, we don't bemoan when a wave crashes at the shore of the edge of the ocean. We note it as a change of pattern. The sum of the number of degrees in the geometric array is 144,000. It takes a certain critical mass to make a mind. And one of the most judiciously held laws of physics is called degrees of freedom in stoichiochemistry. And you can know how elegant a process could be by how many degrees of freedom exist there, strictly chemically speaking. The farmer who leaves a rose after adding nutrient does so with the knowledge that if he interferes with its unfolding, he wouldn't learn from its growth. So the choice to be part of a mind unfolding is the perfect test of love for whether we're ready to be a surfer on the wave, graduate from the schoolroom. Think, what would it take for the surfers on the wave to get together and hold their hands to change the shape of the wave? The test is upon us. Are there any questions? I'm going to have a few more pieces of material to sort of do with video, and maybe, I have the Harmonic Convergence audio tape here. On Sunday I have more time, but why don't we talk? Yes?
Yeah, you have the illustrations that you had of the tower of DNA. Are they from the book that goes with this, or do you have other things published beside that?
They're from the book that goes with this. Sure. Why don't you catch that stuff later so I can kind of sort it out with you, okay? Because some of that I don't have extra copies of. Thank you very much. The book that I have shared here and is available for purchase out in the lobby for $9. The kit with book is $29. The book only is $9. And if you find pieces missing in the kit, send me a note. I'll get them right out to you. And the book with most of the key graphics images, especially of DNA, is in here in its entirety.
And are you going to publish more?
There's a group of us that's working on.
What's the title of the book?
The book is called One Crystal's Dance, The Star Mother, Geometric Keys to the Resonant Spirit of Biology. One crystal dancing, yes.
Something I've been pondering lately.
Mother of stars.
Assuming that the humanity represents the cells of the consciousness, the subconscious of the planet, and the fact that we have dramatically expanded the population of the planet, say since the nomads were roaming and really tuning into Earth energies, do you have a theory about what that is doing to the relationship with Gaia? Or what that buildup of emotional energy is doing to the geometry of the planet?
I think Gaia probably senses the requirement that heat and pressure make gold. And if you need heat and pressure, what you do is you mix. And the natural selection that comes in the mix is investment that Gaia is willing to make. We change diapers on a baby, and Gaia perceives our stink just that way, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when you were talking about what you were talking about, you had, I think you didn't touch on the idea of point, but you did line, area, and volume. But isn't there something after volume?
Yes, so you have this idea that what is the fourth dimension of the cube?
Or just in dimension.
And what is the fourth dimension of the dodecahedron? You add the helix. Actually, in geometric extensions of consciousness, here, the archetype of the evolution of the archetype of the evolution of consciousness is derived from how, in one array, you have the tensor of cube lattice, and then icosahedra, then helix, and then spiral, and then it makes a cube that's much larger, and then it starts over, and then it starts over, and then it starts over. And she has done this from subatomic particle to atom to cell, to molecule to body to galaxy, okay? The idea that in each case superposing another axis of rotation, the next dimension, accomplishes the additional harmonic, which we call mind. I would like to suggest that if there's one metaphor from the carryings on today that we could take to heart, it is that the discipline of the control of human emotion is perhaps the highest science we could aspire to. Our ability to maintain the chalice of our body with perfect nutrition and rest and balanced environment is the accomplishment of this vesicle of the Grail. The genetic strain mutates and takes on an extra ratchet turn, an extra sparkle, which you can see in the eyes. And so if we accomplish this idea that responsibility for the emotions we propagate is how we are or are not building this mind, then the next time we have the taste of joy that we might hold as you would a little child, instead of letting the touch and cloud of fear and something will have been accomplished today. Thank you.